Excellent. All right, welcome everyone. This is our first advisory design panel meeting for 2023. And we'll start it off with introductions. We have some new members this year. And maybe we'll start with Brent. Brent, we can't hear you. I know you took your mute off, but.
Still no.
Still nothing. Oh, I think I just heard something. No. Okay, Brent, while you're working that out, John, we have John Chapman. John, do you mind being the first?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Hi, I'm John Chapman. I'm here on Advisory Design Panel as a member at large, and I'm a resident of Squamish. I have an interest in planning and development, and professionally, I work as a planner. I'm the manager of planning in Whistler. So I've certainly been on the other side of the table, maybe even presented to some of you on this panel in the past. I'm excited to be sitting here as a member of the design panel now.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Elizabeth, over to you.
Hi all. That's right. My name is Elizabeth. I am a resident of Squamish. I have a background in environmental science and landscape architecture. I'm currently a member at large, not the landscape architect on ADP, but work for Lees and Associates in Vancouver, a landscape architecture and planning firm.
Thank you. Jamie.
Yep, Jamie Hart. I'm one of the Architect AIBC members on panel for the last year and a half or so. And I work for public architecture and communication here in Vancouver and kind of lived up and down sea to sky between Whistler and North Van.
Thank you. Kat?
Hi, I'm Kat. I am the Executive Director of Squamish Arts and also a resident in Squamish. I am here kind of on the side of the public art for the ADP.
Awesome, thank you. Over to Luke.
Hi, I'm Luke Tyson. I'm a resident of Squamish as well. I sit on the member at large seat. I have a background in architecture and a small amount of planning, and I actually work for an architect company here in Squamish too.
Thank you. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Tickler. I'm the longest member on ADP, I think. I'm an accessibility consultant. I work for the municipality in Whistler in planning, and am keen to see things be a bit more inclusive. I live in Squamish.
Thanks, Sarah. And let's try Brent again.
Okay, hopefully, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Always lots of fun with these virtual meetings. Yeah, Brent McMurtry. I'm a professional engineer for urban systems, and I am the EGBC representative. I'm a resident of Squamish, and yeah, have sort of my professional area is more on the transportation side of things. So yeah, been on the ADP for quite a while. I think everyone other than Sarah, I'm here the second longest. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent. And Lucas?
Hi, all. My name is Lucas Barabee. So I'm to sitting on the UDI committee seat. My professional life, I'm Director of Development at Boza Properties. Not a resident of Squamish, resident of Vancouver, but I'm seeing.
It's really tough to hear you, Lucas. Is there anything you could do to?
Yeah, how's that, Jonas? Sorry about that.
That's way better.
Better. Should I take it from the top? I'll start from the top. My name is Lucas Barabee. New to the ADP, joining as the new UDI liaison member. Professionally, I'm director of development with Bosa Properties, heading up the Sea and Sky development. So not a resident of Squamish, unfortunately, still a resident of Vancouver, but spending a lot of time in your beautiful community and happy to be on the seat.
Awesome. Did I miss anybody else out of the ADP members? Oh, Sama, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Sama Abri, Architect, AIBC. I'm representing Architecture Institute of BC and currently working as a Quality Control Project Management with City of Vancouver. I am currently overseeing the project processes and project delivery within the REFM Real Estate Department with City of Vancouver.
Yeah. Thank you, Sama, and welcome to the ADP. And then we have Charles.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Charles Lehman. I'm as well one of the AIBC architect representatives on the panel. I currently work with Acoustics Architecture in Vancouver, and I reside in North Vancouver.
Thank you. I think this is it. I think the rest of the members on here are representing application. So our second order of business is to elect a chair and a vice chair. Is there anybody who would like to volunteer their name or would like to nominate somebody?
I'm okay to do that. I've been on several panels previously.
Okay, so we have Charles. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm also okay to have my name forward.
Brent, you got to speak up. I could not hear anything.
Yeah, I'm also, yeah, I'll put my name forward to chair, vice chair, if you can hear me.
So my understanding is you're also putting your name forward, right? Okay. Perfect. So we do need a chair and a vice chair. Would either, just before we start voting, would either one of you be happy with either position, or are you both interested in the chair?
I'd be happy with either.
Perfect. Okay, so why don't we see how many votes we have for Charles as being the chair? Yeah, so the motion would be that Charles Lehman be elected as the chair for 2023.
So how do we vote? Just raising hand?
Yeah, raise your hand if you're in favor.
Right.
Charles, you can't vote on that one.
All right.
Okay, how many votes did you catch the votes, Carly? Is that everybody, basically? Okay, perfect. And oh yes, we need somebody to second that motion. Perfect. And next, that Brent McMurray be elected as the vice chair for 2023. All. And somebody seconded. John seconded. And we're good to go. Excellent. Thank you. And now we can get to the business of the ADP. I will note that on my list of things to do is to bring a bit of a refresher to the ADP that I couldn't get it done for this meeting, but I'm hoping that for the next meeting we'll do a half-an-hour session on the role of the ADP and answer any questions that the members may have. Luckily, it looks like we have quite a bit of experience here, so it may not be critical. Sure. Although we have Charles. Charles, do you feel confident of running the meeting from here on?
I do have the agenda open in the background there, so yes, I believe I can do that.
Okay. Over to you, Charles.
All right. Sorry, I'm trying to get it up in front of WebEx again. Here we are. All right. So welcome to the Squamish Nation traditional territory. Are we rehearsing the usual text here? I don't have it in the agenda, and I don't have that memorized.
Just the land acknowledgement is all we need. Should be in the agenda.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was just reading.
That's fine. Yep.
All right. We have an adoption of agenda. So do we have a first and second on the adoption of the agenda as it is? Sama? And great. I think Brent had his hand up there. We've got several seconds. So are we voting on this? Yay on the adoption of the minutes? Great. It looks like we have a unanimous. All right. Item number 4, delegations and petitions. Do we have any such today?
No, we don't.
Great. Next item. Business. We have 2 items on the agenda today. The first is a review of development permit 592 Upper Finch Drive Townhomes, which will be followed by development permit 594 1701 Centennial Way Phase 2. I believe we are now ready to begin the presentation on the Upper Finch Drive Townhomes. Do we have a representative, or are we beginning with staff?
I'm happy to do a brief intro, Chair. Thanks. My name is Brian Daly. I'm a planner here at the District of Squamish. So this development permit application represents 18 townhomes located at 1070 Finch Drive. The proposed development is subject to Development Permit Area 3 Universal Guidelines. The townhomes are part of the development contemplated during a recent rezoning application, which rezoned 1050, 1056, 1057, 1060, and 1070 Finch Drive from RS1 to Comprehensive Development Zone 101 to allow for the development of duplexes, townhomes, and apartment dwellings. This project has not been previously presented to ADP, and staff are generally supportive of the site plan and specifically request ADP's recommendations on building form and character and landscaping as it pertains to the DPA 3 guidelines. So with that, I will pass it over to the applicant's team and let them make their presentation.
Thanks, Brian. My name is Paul. I'm an architect at Stark Architecture. We're an 18-person firm here in Squamish. I'm also a resident of Squamish. I'm excited to be presenting to you today. Firm focuses mainly on passive house, residential, low carbon developments. So
apologies, can we get you to raise the volume just a touch?
Sure. How's this? Is that any better? Is this any better? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Ryan, it looks like my share content button is grayed out. Is there a way to share my screen?
Would one of the IT folks be able to give Paul presenter privileges, please, or allow him to share a screen?
Sweet. There we go. Just came up. All right. So yeah, as Brian mentioned, this is phase 2 of the Finch Drive development. So Stark and Diamond Head Development are presented today. And phase 1 of the development, were, just to clarify, were duplexes that did not require so this presentation is focusing only on phase 2, which are the townhouses. So our vision for this development really comes down to 5 kind of key points. We're looking to serve a growing Squamish community with a diversity of housing types, preserve the local ecology and forested hillside with minimal sight and visual disturbance, but clean, simple geometry paired with a color and material palette that complements the natural context. Sustainability is a huge part of this. So we are really excited about producing this low carbon, all electric development. There's no natural gas, with solar power generating capacity and geothermal heating and cooling. And this will result in Squamish's first Step 5 net zero development. And connection. So multi-use paths and landscape and pedestrian circulation connects all the different phases of Finch Drive with existing and future trail networks, and incentivizes non-fossil fuel transport, such as EV charging stations for electric vehicles, bike parking, bike wash stations. The design concept, the inspiration for this development is taken from the natural environment of the site. Material palette and form of the buildings is reflected in the undulating green patterns of the forest and the angular form of exposed granite patterns, along with the natural warmth. This diagram is just kind of indicating how the house units are oriented on site. So we have solar orientation with a sloped roof that's oriented towards the south to take advantage of solar. The color palette is a gradient of green. So we're looking at kind of mimicking the color of the forest and how these subtle changes make this like a really interesting concept to look at. So that's what we're aiming for with our color palette. Design inspiration. So again, cited in natural contexts and implementing natural tones and materials. All these precedents kind of seek to embody what Finch Drive wants to create, which is clean geometry, blending in with a natural context, using simple colors and wood tone. The small envelope extensions allow for weather protection and frame interior volumes paired with a simple offset pitched roof that give both weather protection and privacy to each unit. Building design and energy efficiency. So just highlighting some of the key concepts. We're using insulated concrete forms, panelized framing, triple glazed windows, step code 5 net zero ready, fully solar powered, and using geothermal heating. Both Stark and DHD are really excited to be climate change leaders in this field, and trying to really do what's right and push the envelope, setting standards in Squamish and going beyond what's required, which is step 4, and really going into the step 5 net zero ready. Creating community and fellowship, sharing common attitudes, interests, and values is something that really are looking to provide in this development. And then responding to the sensitivities of the site, interconnecting with the forest and trails. So just to kind of give some site context, phase 2 is right here. And the overall development is 5 full phases, including plexus and future apartment buildings. Site connection is something that is really important for this development. So this, you can see in the magenta dashed line, we've got multi-use paths from Finch to Loggers. And where these arrows are trail connections to existing trails in the Legacy Sports Park, which is to and then a western trail connecting Finch and Raven Drive, western edge. And then we're providing a lot of community park shared open space. And then other highlights, we've got wildlife-proof waste enclosures here, post, and then 2 covered community structures, one at the townhouses, and then so site context. This just gives a kind of visual description of how steeply sloped this site is. So the townhouses are kind of right in the middle. They're set into this kind of nook and really kind of sited in a way that tucks them into the site and works with our intent of funding the site. So just getting into a larger site plan, we've got considered parking, accessible parking, wildlife-proof waste enclosure here, and then we've got 2 kind of main unit designs. There's T3 on the west here, and then T1 and 2 east. And then just these sections showing kind of existing grade 2 grade. Materials and finishes. So we're using non-combustible fiber cement and metal cladding on all the exterior surfaces, which is in compliance with the wildfire DP bylaw. And really keeping the material palette as simple as possible. So we've got this gradient of greens. We've got this kind of concrete base, and then printed wood tones and highlight areas where we have these fin wall extensions. Again, just looking at T3 and the backside. So we've got the lower patios with the deck, and then just the same kind of 3 major materials. The side ends of the units, again, just really simple. We've got the concrete plinth, which is clad in hardy, and then just charcoal gray to kind of frame the overall sides of the buildings. Just a quick look into the unit plans. The GFA for each of these units is right around 8 square feet. And just a quick overview of the floor plan. So we've got a garage area that's pushed back, and a driveway that's available for parking, at least 2 bike parking spaces inside, and then an open space plan on level 2, which on the east townhouses, you can see the north area. So this area being east, we've got a walkout patio and bedrooms on the top floor. And on the T3 West units, way, so patios are looking out to the west with the views. Again, with the level 2 garage and level 3. Another thing that we're looking at is just the future adaptability of these units. So just a quick overview of the BC requirements of providing access to common living areas, and one bedroom and room having a clear width, floor space on both sides of the bathroom and bedroom, aligned with the spatial requirements for future installation of grab bars, and then just there's a few elements that would either have to be modified from the current design, front or after the fact. So the kitchen layout, is lower than standard 36 inches. We are able to install a stair lift with straight run and a curve around the landing. So we're well over the and then the ensuite in the master bedroom have the kind of tub removed and allow for a larger. So, but also kind of place into just at ground level, how do you circulate around? So the strata roads at a 2% grade can go into each unit, patio on 3, or up to the back patio on level 2, up to 1 and 2, and then the waste enclosure is also accessible from grade. For site photos, just to give some context of what the site looks like, we're really taking advantage of that Squamish knows and loves with GK and Squamish Valley and the Howe Sound. The site really provides some really incredible points to all of these areas. There's trees everywhere, and so we're keeping as many trees as possible in this site, and really integrating this project in with the environment as much as possible, and really playing into the color palette of the existing site condition. And I'll let Alexa now talk about.
Hi, everyone. Just want to say thank you for the opportunity to present to the design panel. My name is Alexa Gonzalez. I'm a landscape architect with Durante Crook in Vancouver. I'll try and keep my presentation brief, and we can take some questions at the end. So just to start, so we're using the success of the recent Skyridge site as a conceptual starting point for this project. We've been working really closely with the development team to implement a complementary landscape design that balances and showcases the handsome architecture developed by Stark Architecture and the Diamond Head team. It's important to note that we've designed this space with a holistic view of the master plan, and that while this phase is under review, it is part of a bigger site plan concept and works in conjunction with the other phases and was designed simultaneously with the adjacent duplex site. Because our site is situated within the forested hillside and of the sloped Squamish backdrop, we're aiming for our landscape design to be simple, clean, and let the beauty of the natural environment all around the site be the real showcase. We've located the proposed trees on the project to enhance and promote the incredible valley views from the townhomes, with the understanding that we are situated within a natural retained landscape context surrounded by existing trees all around the project perimeter and the natural slopes to create an oasis within the forest context. Additionally, we're limiting the trees on site to ensure our project adheres to the required wildfire planting guidelines that strictly enforces appropriate species, spacing, and proximity to buildings. Our goal for the open space on the site was to provide open, flexible yard spaces that promote the love of outdoors, neighborly interactions, and a pride of place. These feature a mix of open lawn area, paved patios, and shrub planting. Specifically, the planting schematics themselves utilize an extensive mix of native species, drought-tolerant perennials, and ornamental grasses and shrubs that have all been carefully selected to both be bear-aware as well as wildfire-resistant per the district guidelines. And finally, I'd like to note that geotechnical and environmental consultants have also been brought onto the team to provide expertise and direction on the extensive grading and remediation conditions all along the perimeter of the site. And we'll continue to work closely with them and provide input along the way to ensure our townhomes blend into the surrounding environment seamlessly. I'm not sure if there's anything else, Paul, that you'd like to add in terms of site plan context, but I think if we're ready, we can take some questions from the panel.
Okay. If this is the end of your presentation, thank you very much. And now, Charles, normally what we would do is have a round of questions. So essentially go around the table, give every panel member an opportunity to ask a few questions, and then we'll do the same round again with comments. So if the applicant could stop sharing the video, that'd be great.
All right, is there any particular order we would prefer to have the panel proceed in?
I think as the chair, you could go by your screen. So, you could just go in order of the panel members that you see, if that's the easiest.
All right, that's fine. So I'm going to invite Sama then to comment or to ask questions, I guess, of the proponent.
Thank you. My first question is, what is the applicant low carbon strategy for the site, low carbon construction, as well as energy efficiency use, strategy? For example, do you have EV charging for the parking, and
Yeah.
and
So,
where is the location?
yeah. So the routes are all oriented to the south. Then coordinating with our.
Paul, are you able to turn up your mic or move it closer to you? It's really challenging to hear.
Sorry. Is that any better? Is this any better to you guys?
No, it's still, it sounds like you're in a box.
How about now?
That's good.
Okay. Great. I think maybe our computer was picking up the wrong microphone. So yeah, so I'll just start off with solar. So we have been coordinating with our energy consultant and solar supplier that have confirmed that we can meet the net zero requirements and the annual energy demand with the projected solar load. Of course, there's always variables with weather, but so far we are on track for that. The geothermal heating and cooling is something that we're also really excited about using in this project, which will just reduce the overall energy demand for heating and cooling. We will be providing the electrical and built-in kind of infrastructure in all of the garages for EV charging. And then in terms of low carbon construction, I mean, wood being a renewable resource is one, and then the fiber cement panels and metal cladding are something that we are required to use non-combustible cladding, and so those are our current choices for that. So I hope that addressed your question.
Okay, thank you. My other question is about the accessibility. Can I ask more question, or? Okay. Just the accessibility. Have you explored more design solutions to provide the minimum requirement of the bylaw without just relying on the lifter?
It's something that we looked at early on, just due to the kind of really small building footprint that we have to work with and the steep nature of the site. It's really difficult to provide anything without relying on a stair lift.
Thank you.
The next person I see on my screen would be, I believe, Brian.
I am a staff member and not a member of
Oh, yes, of course. So that would be Brent therefore.
Great. Thanks, Charles. Can you hear me okay, Paul and crew? Yeah. Okay. Just a couple of questions. The first question is a larger kind of site plan question, and if any, I guess, a pedestrian access connecting, I think it's Road E, kind of the road that splits between the duplexes and the townhouse complex. If pedestrian access to the west to connect towards Finch Drive was explored, I know that's a very steep slope, but sort of looking at a obvious desire line, especially for people in this townhouse complex. Wondering if that, was looked at.
Yeah, so we do have sidewalks on that road where the future phase 4 and 5 are that connects to the west from Finch Drive, and then from there there is a landscape stair kind of on the edges of phase 1 that you would then be able to kind of go down onto some of the landscape piers and connect back onto the Finch Drive Road. So there's no kind of straight line access because of how steep the site is, but there are pedestrian routes that you can take from top to bottom.
Okay. And then next question was just on the like kind of gradation of greens. And yeah, I like the approach. Just wondering if other color palettes were explored or how kind of that, I don't know, and part of it's probably my screen, but I don't see a lot of variation, but a little bit. And it's kind of one of those things that, yeah, if you could maybe just kind of expand on that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, so we spent a lot of time just looking at the available colors for just the types of paint that we're looking at, and landed on 4 that we really liked, and then an alternating pattern. We previously had looked at some other materials, but we felt that the green really did the best job at allowing the buildings to kind of recede into the background, and that's something that I think is really key for our design intent for this project, is as much as possible to kind of really highlight the natural surroundings and kind of let the buildings just kind of float there.
Okay. And then 2 more questions. One is if any different roof lines were considered, sort of recognizing the variation in color for the facade, if the variation in a roof line was considered.
Yeah, we've looked at a few different like pitches of roof and different directions of roof. Obviously, we want to orient the roofs to the south for all of them, just for solar aspect. And then the kind of way that we're tying the roof into the overall kind of fin extrusion of each unit, we felt ended in a really kind of seamless way. We looked at some steeper roof pitches, but felt that the current roof pitch was kind of really ideal from a visual aesthetic perspective on our end and from a solar provision. Yeah.
Okay. And then last question is about the faux wood metal siding. I think it's used as an accent, and not a product that I'm unfamiliar with, and sort of recognizing that the wildfire bylaw needs to be met. But just if you could comment, or I guess if other materials were explored and how this was selected.
Yeah, so we definitely wanted some type of kind of feature material to accentuate the kind of envelope extrusion there. And having a natural wood tone just felt like the right mix with just the kind of mimicry of the forest, and that particular wood tone is from a metal panel product that we've been looking into that we're pretty excited about. That's both really durable, has good warranties, and is cost effective, and all of that, and meets the wildfire requirements.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
All right, I believe the next person in line would be Elizabeth.
Thanks. I have 2 questions. One, how are you managing stormwater on site? And number 2, I wonder if you can explain the berm on the west side of building 3 and how that's working in terms of like existing grades. And whether those hydrangeas are planted in front of the berm or on top. It's kind of hard to tell from the landscape plan.
Yeah, I can briefly talk to that. Maybe Alexa can add some at the end. So we are working with a civil engineer and a geotechnical engineer on those elements. The stormwater for the site is all being managed on site with a stormwater retention area, which is the little pond, if you're looking at the site plan, kind of in between the 2 apartment buildings on the west side of the site. And so through underground infrastructure and on-site runoff, it's all being kind of funneled into that zone. In terms of the berm, it is a geotechnical design berm for so I guess what's east of there is more steep slope, and so it's both a rockfall catchment berm, but it is planted in a way that's similar to kind of the rest of the stepped 2x2 retaining wall tiers, where we've got plantings of grasses like on the top, and so yeah, that's something that's more detailed in our geotechnical drawings. Alexa, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just add the landscape concept for the actual berm itself, as Paul noted, is going to follow more of like the remediation concept. So it's all of the dotted in native species that will be pocket planted and site fitted. The fence line and the hydrangeas are more of an expression towards the yardscape to get to layer that concept coming off of that berm and soften that edge a little bit. So that would be at the base of the berm with an expression to the townhomes, as opposed to at the top of a berm and creating additional height and cutting down your views.
Yeah, I see it now. Yeah, thanks.
All right, next person would be Jamie.
Thanks, Charles. I just have two questions. First, about summer thermal comfort strategy. Just a question to the architect about whether mechanical cooling is provided by those ground source heat pumps, and or if there's also a passive shading solution anywhere.
Yeah, so we are looking at using the ground source heat pumps with the geothermal for cooling, and then the roofs do have an extension. It's fairly small, and then we are also looking at high performance windows to reduce that extra thermal gain.
And then just a second question about the solar PV system. Apologies if you mentioned this in your statements, but I'm just wondering if the actual PV array is part of the construction, on day one turned over to the owners, or if it's a rough-in and you've evaluated the future capacity of it.
It's all going to be ready for solar panels, so all the wiring will be ready. In terms of providing the actual solar panels on day one, I think it's something that we're still evaluating. But we just got confirmation a couple of days ago that the expected annual energy demand for the units will be able to be met by the solar capacity of those roofs.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. That's all I had.
Jason Wood.
Sorry, Jason's part of the applicant team. He's from Daly.
Oh, he is. Okay. John Chapman then.
Thanks, Charles. That's great. I have just a couple of questions. So I guess I would ask the same question as Brent. It seems like a miss not to have some familiarity with the site. I recognize the steep slope, but it seems unfortunate not to have a direct pathway stairs downhill from the townhouses. So it's unfortunate. Question about, I think it's the group of townhouses labeled T3, so the downhill or westerly building. Is there access to the backyard? I was looking at the drawings and it looked like there weren't stairs coming off the decks. Is there any access off the backside into the backyard for those units?
Yes, there's access through the garage. So there's a door from the garage out to the backyard.
Okay. And then I had a question about the garages, I guess. So, I understand this form with 2 living stories above a garage is quite common, like for that 3-story townhouse in Squamish, and I understand that often has to do with, building in a floodplain and the necessity of, you can't have habitable space sometimes on that first floor. In this case, I assume that these townhouses aren't in a floodplain. Is that right?
Yeah, they would be above the floodplain.
So just, thinking about the choice of that form, certainly the development permit area guidelines speak to, a desire for welcoming building entrances. There's certainly like accessibility issues with that, small front door and really immediate steep stairs to get up to a living space. I wonder if was any thought given to looking at a different kind of layout for the townhouses in this location, because there isn't that necessity to build to an FCL.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just address that briefly. Other than saying that there was a lot of design iterations early on, the main driver for this is how steeply the site is rising to the east and how much room we have for a building footprint. And so in order to provide both the width of the strata road and the driveways, it left really very little room before we were going to have massive cuts into the existing hillside or cantilevering off the other side. And so the design that we ended with was really a way to minimize the building footprint and maximize living space.
And one last question. I've heard that the kind of tandem parking layout can often kind of be a bit problematic. So similarly, just wonder if you considered any other parking layouts.
And just in terms of driveway, the typical kind of tandem townhouse unit really is the most efficient. I mean, we are providing some visitor parking there. But yeah, just due to, again, how constrained this site is in terms of available buildable area, it was really challenging to find a different solution than the one that we ended with, which I think we're happy with.
If I could just add, I probably should have mentioned this in my preamble. To the west, immediately to the west on that very steep slope is an environmentally sensitive forest. Which is one of the reasons why there is no pedestrian connection proposed at this time. And another one of the reasons why this footprint is so limited. So I just thought I would add that in there for context.
Thanks for that clarification, Brian.
I believe the next person to speak would be Kat.
Thank you. I saw in your report that public art is not proposed for this development, so I was hoping you could speak to what phase you're looking to include public art and the decision-making process around what that would look like.
Yeah, that's a great comment. It's not something that we have discussed to date. We're still kind of in the early design phases, especially for phases 3 through 5. So it's something that's going to happen during those later design phases.
And I think the first phase didn't have to come to the ADP. Can someone speak to if those phases will come to the ADP and will it go through this review?
I'm happy to speak to that. The first phase did not because they were duplex units, not subject to form and character development permit. The future ones are all apartment buildings, and they are where some of the community park and shared open space will be located, and that would likely be a more appropriate location for public art. And
Okay,
those will go to ADP.
That's all for me.
Lucas.
Yeah, thanks very much, Charles. So first question is, how many total units are projected for phase one? Understanding this phase is 18 townhomes, but total number.
Sorry, Lucas, we're not
Your
hearing you.
microphone
You have
closer.
to hold your.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry about that. Everybody all at once. The first question I had is what are the total number of homes projected for phases 1 through 4? Understanding that 18 townhomes are part of the second phase, but total number across the 4 phases.
So yeah, the total number in phase 2 are 18 units. The total number in phase 1 are 20 units. The total units for all phases currently is 215.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks. And so with regard to 215 total homes, where would be the closest kind of park or child's play area to these 18 townhomes? Completely recognizing that kind of buildable area is quite constrained in this site, but I just had trouble picking it from my view of the site plan.
Yeah, so we are providing park space in both phases 3 and 4. And then the childcare will be part of one of those apartment buildings.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. And then the next question is more on the design side. So I was wondering if there is any consideration given to kind of the provision of a transom or side light in areas, and maybe it's just the way the elevation, but it does look like sort of the street interface of the homes contains a lot of blank wall, and also just for light ingress considerations in the garage. I was wondering if there's any consideration given to that.
It's still a little bit hard to hear you. Was your question about transit?
Sorry. No, not at all. Sorry, is everybody having the same challenges picking up what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Is this any better?
A bit, yeah.
Okay. No, my next question was just around if there was any consideration for side lights or transoms in the garage in the garages, because the way the elevation reads to me is that the ground level interface contains a lot of blank wall, and I was just wondering if there was consideration given to that.
Yeah, so the ground level on T3 is primarily garage door and the entry door, and the backyards would be a location where we could feasibly provide some transom, and then on T1 and 2, that level is mostly buried.
Perfect. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, I believe we have Luke would be next.
Thanks. Thanks, Paul and Alexa, for the presentation, by the way. My first question is the distance between the townhomes T1 and T2 and the proposed future apartment building. Do you have like a dimension between the proposed edges of the building face? Like how close are they?
Sorry, between
like the I'm just looking at your section on A105 and just the kind of the distance between T2 and what looks like the face of the parkade.
Right. So let me just pull that drawing up.
And then also, like in terms of planting between those two buildings, what is proposed? Because I'm struggling to read the landscape drawings to see what plants are there.
Yeah, so just to clarify that first question, so the line that's directly behind T1 and T2.
Yes, the distance between the buildings of like the townhome buildings, T2, and the future apartment building that's going in the next phase.
Yeah, so from the face of the apartment building to the face of the townhouses, we're looking at 18 meters. But there is a landscape step that goes kind of to a planted roof of the parkade there before that. That specific distance is something that we're going to be fully refining during phase 5 and design of AP4.
In its current state, we're looking at about 7.5 meters essentially from our T1 and T2 building face to the edge of the potential parkade step. Understanding that there will be a grade change because of the sloping condition of the site. It will be a wall condition, so we're looking to do some evergreen rhododendrons that would essentially break up what that expression is of that parkade wall and visually limit what the impact of that wall is going to be.
Okay, thank you. And also, has there been any consideration in how you might preserve the privacy of the bedrooms in T2 from the apartment buildings, which will probably encroach on that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's definitely something that we will be thinking about during the design of the apartment building. Thankfully, though, one way that the grade is working for us is most of the apartment windows will be looking directly across from the townhouses. The envelope extension, the roof overhang will provide a little bit of shading from view lines. So especially as you go further up in the apartment building, the amount that if you were actually trying to look into somebody's window, it should be fairly minimal of the amount of room space that's visible.
Okay, thanks. And I was noting on the sort of the entrances to all of these townhomes, you have noted an artistic slatted privacy fence. Could you like walk me through the kind of the design intent of that and the materiality, please?
Yeah, so the privacy fence currently it's not fully designed yet, but it would be a wood slat, vertical wood slat fence. That's something that we'll be finalizing during the next stage of design.
Okay, if it's a vertical wood slat fence, would that meet the wildfire thing? Or would it have to be something else like metal?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I know it's because it's not part of the building. It's not, subject to the cladding requirements. In terms of landscape features, Alexa, can you talk any to that?
To my memory, there wasn't a limitation on the fence material for the wildfire guidelines. It's more about the plant material and spacing. So we are actually like proposing wood fencing on the perimeter of the site, for example. So I can't imagine if we're doing it there, that would be an issue in this privacy screen condition. Particularly, it's relative to the building face, is coming off the building face and underneath of that overhang. So not necessarily integral, but certainly part of the architectural expression.
Thanks. And then the posts that are kind of outside the entry as well, they're noted as hardy clad. Are they just wood posts clad in hardy?
That's correct. They're a structural wood post that's clad in hardy, and that would need to have the non-combustible cladding on it.
Okay. Could you explain more about your strategy for lighting on the project as well, like illuminating the entrances or any kind of street lighting that's proposed?
I can briefly speak to some of the street lighting. We've been working with a civil consultant to ensure that we've got adequate light levels along the roadways through street light standards. Those are shown on the landscape plan with flanking lights coming down Road E, and then we have 2 additional lights along the straddle lane in front of the townhomes. So that's essentially how the landscape is being lit. We are trying to limit the impact of landscape lighting in this particular area, trying to make sure we're dark sky compliant. And we do have limited areas where we have common outdoor space, so it doesn't necessarily make sense to light the whole place up. But perhaps Paul can speak to any additional architectural lighting on the project.
Yeah, and for building lighting, we'll be working with our interior designer to find products that will work with the architectural intent. So the kind of soffit at the garage area will have lighting in it. It's something that will be furthering in later design phases.
Okay, thanks. I think that's my questions for now. Cheers.
Great. And can I invite Sarah, please?
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to clarify a few things. So because there weren't the adaptability slides included in the package, are you proposing that all of these units are going to be adaptable?
We are not proposing that they will be fully adaptable to begin with, just due to this particularly the kitchen kind of requirements. But it's something that all the units could be made into an adaptable unit fairly easily.
So you will be putting backing in the walls for your future stair lifts and for future grab bars in the bathrooms?
I think it's something that we would definitely want to do for at least one of the units. We'll have to explore the further extent of that with our client.
So one of the 215 units that you're building?
Sorry, one of the 18 townhouses, and then for future phases, at least one of each building. But yeah, we're definitely open to exploring.
Very small amount. Can you tell me, have you explored at all any access from Road E to the back side of T1 and T2 buildings so that they could be, in essence, I mean, not truly visitable because I don't think that the bathrooms are, but at least somebody would be able to come into the back deck to have a meal with someone if need be? Has that been explored?
That's a great point. It's something that's not currently feasible with the current design. But I think as we get into the phase 4 design, it's certainly something that we can take into account. I think that's a great comment and a great idea.
Well, I mean, it would, you could have permeable pavers so that it's grass in essence coming along there and would just be available for somebody to go in through the backside to have a visit with somebody would be a massive step. That's all my comments at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have I missed anyone on the panel? No? Great. I actually have, I believe this has, been discussed, but I want to further clarify. There is, if we look at the sections, it does appear that there's a berm to the west that is essentially almost the height of that lower floor, so that the T3 units, their exterior patios, are essentially, you know, below grade. I mean, you have the building on one side and you have the berm on the other, and you have no view from that exterior space. I just want to confirm that that's what's happening there, and maybe have an explanation of how the back of that berm, which appears to be cut at quite a steep angle, is being treated.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. So this section is cut at the highest point there. So there's an existing crest of hill there. And we had looked at an option that that just flattened that out. However, as Brian mentioned, that whole area is an environmentally sensitive treat area. And so in order to really minimize the amount of that area that we are impacting, we had to kind of pull back that backyard space. And so the berm that you're seeing in this section would be the highest amount, and then it would kind of taper off to either side. And it will be stabilized in conjunction with our coordination with our geotechnical consultant with rock and plantings.
Thank you. I believe we now move to a round of comments from the panel. Jonas,
That's
if you,
correct.
yes. So I would suggest that we maybe proceed in the reverse order this time, and let's have Sarah start out.
Okay, so I think that 1 out of 18 units to be adaptable is a very small number, and it's slightly misleading to say that these are all adaptable when in fact you would have to rip apart the walls to put in extra backing in order to put in your lift, or in order to put in grab bars, take everything out. So they aren't, in their current state, if they don't have backing in the wall, not truly adaptable. So just be cautious of how you're describing these units. And I would spend some time to explore accessing the backside of these units, so that at least, you know, somebody can visit at the very least.
Thank you.
Great. So who was directly previous to Sarah? I believe that was Luke.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just formalizing my thoughts. No. Okay. Yeah. Looking at I'll start with the building materiality and form and character. I think that the entries need to be kind of more like carefully considered. As I like the idea of the slatted fence, but as understandably, meeting step 4 is always quite tricky. It's also ever important to try and articulate or create those areas of privacy. And if it's all kind of one color, seeing that more detail put into that slatted fence might be able to satisfy that. Especially, it could be an opportunity to use if you can get away with the wildfire restrictions, then yeah, wood I think would be great, especially complementing that soffit. The clad timber posts as well in that entry as hardy. It might also be worth reviewing if possible doing that, if it's possible to do it out of heavy timbers that could further complement it and negate the requirement for, you know, weather barrier, strapping, a hardy panel and all the flashing that comes with it. It could be somewhat of an untidy detail that might ruin your entry, and you might be able to save on that a little bit. I have a particular bit of concern with privacy in the site plan, the way everything's arranged in a linear format. The problem with townhomes is I guess that they always have a some kind of privacy issue. But when you start arranging townhomes directly adjacent to apartment buildings, as they're used differently and people use their decks, it might actually have a different interface between the users where you might have privacy issues and even sound issues on an evening. So it might be, that could be something that's solved with something as simple as landscaping, but I think careful consideration should be given to the next phase, especially when you're so tight on the space. I commend you on the use of on your low carbon vision. I think seeing step 5 would be great. I think that the roof lines, they'll be great, and it especially works well with the solar panels orientated to the south. I'm still a little unsure as to what areas are riparian and what aren't, but it would be great to see further pedestrian connectivity or like pedestrian circulation given west to east on this site. I think it'd be very difficult living there, having to walk around, especially in winter. And it might even give more opportunities for play if there was some kind of pathway between the top and the bottom where maybe it's not necessarily accessible, but you could actually use the slope to create areas for kids to play on in the forest, because that's what a lot of kids do here. And I'll leave those comments for now. Thank you.
Kat?
Thank you. As it hasn't been considered really that much at this point towards public art, something I'll add as a hesitation or a bit of a warning for you moving forward is that what I've seen a lot from presentations in the ADP is that certain artists are reached out to and there's no public call. And so I'm seeing very repetitively the same artists, especially Indigenous artists, being chose for every design. So I would be careful, especially if you are choosing in the future to work with an Indigenous designer, to do some type of call for proposal or call for artist, to perhaps not use the same 2 artists that are being used in most of the designs in the past couple of ADPs I've seen. And then I think there is obviously the one kind of big public art idea of this, but there are also ways to incorporate public art into, say, even this design. So I saw in your report that there's like bike parking, a bike wash station, a gazebo, a shared waste room. So this could be something where you have one thing designed and then it can be a repeatable design incorporated into some of those things. I'm not sure exactly what the bike parking is, but for instance, if you had like bike racks on site, you could have those designed by an artist and then have those fabricated. So you're just paying for the one design, but then you do have functional public art through your entire site. So I would invite you to look into options to integrate even something small into each phase so that it's not just one piece of public art away from the rest of the design.
Thank you.
I believe John was next.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess I'll add a couple of comments. Echoing Sarah, it'd be really nice to see the buildings like designed and constructed so that accessibility requirements could, if they're not going to be included right off the bat, could be really easily retrofitted. I think it's with these 3-story townhouses in particular, that would be really nice to see. I think that in building T3, access from habitable floors to the backyard would be something to consider, rather than out of the garage there. And then very much, understand some of the constraints, but that west-east pedestrian connectivity, it just seems like a real miss. It'd be really nice to see something done there.
Sorry, I think I skipped Lucas. No, yes, I believe I skipped Lucas by mistake there.
Yeah, no problem. I think before I even start speaking, I'll ask how my microphone is. Can everybody hear me okay?
It could be better.
Louder.
Okay. Sorry, I'm in an open concept office, so I'm just kind of wary of screaming into it, but I'll try. How's that?
That's good.
Okay. Just start by saying overall, I do appreciate kind of the design intent to provide kind of undulating greens and natural materiality that blends into the the beautiful established surrounding landscape. Um, I I do think in kind of looking at the elevations, um, there is a kind of a lack of contour in the materiality, and I think that the depth of the kind of faux timber frames is going to be really important in kind of establishing our articulation and establishing a variation in the facade. So the not picked up in the elevation obviously, but picked up in the rendering, and if that is indeed an accurate representation of the depth, I think that's just going to be really important. But I do think it looks good, and I also know that sometimes that's the first thing to kind of get value engineered out is the depth of frames. But I think in this case it is a really important design feature. And the other comment that I would have is there, with regard to kind of privacy at the street level. I do kind of appreciate letting the mature trees in the surrounding environment speak for themselves, but there does seem to be a bit of lack of privacy established between the homes on the ground plane. So maybe that's something that could be looked into. But overall, I do like the design intent, and I do think that sort of the wide shallow units are excellent use of kind of the constrained site in the space. Thanks.
Jamie?
Thank you. I'll look here. So first of all, I'd say I understand the constraints of the fire smart regulations. So there's obviously a limited material palette that's available. I just encourage the applicant to pay attention to the detailing of hardy panel joints. I think a lot of it will really succeed or fail on the basis of how well that kind of single material is detailed. And then just to add to Luke's comments about articulating the unit entry a little bit more, since this kind of shared laneway is so kind of dominated by parked cars, it'd be nice to make a little bit more of a neighborly feel to people's entries. I do think that, I recognize the constraints of the site and how steeply graded it is. And then I think the typology of the kind of narrow footprint townhome combined with the kind of site conditions means there's definitely some compromises, significant compromises in terms of accessibility, and then just to do with the position, the overall siting of the building, transport access and car dependency, but that's a broader kind of discussion. So I second John's comments about accessibility in the particular unit typology though, and the very small footprint, and the use of, the whole available footprint for a garage on the ground floor. I do appreciate the sort of consistency of the materials. I think the buildings are not very large, each of the 3 buildings, so there's no need to start introducing more different materials beyond the 2 that's shown. So I appreciate the restraint in the material use and the color palette. I appreciate the simple roof form. I think it's nice that there's been consideration of the solar PV system. It would be great statement from the developer, I think, to look to actually include that in the construction. Great way to offset, you got peak cooling demand in the summer, in the time where you're getting peak solar output from the solar panel. So it's a really nice kind of complement, and hopefully the owners will take up that opportunity. What else? I do also appreciate just the kind of simplicity of the building form. I think it'll be, a really effective way to provide kind of an affordable step 5 level of construction. It's not overly complicated. The architectural flourishes are usually kind of accomplished by overhangs and kind of articulation of flanking walls or outside the thermal envelope. So I think it's a really clever starting point for a building that's looking to really hit high performance. I think there's a lot to like about the scheme, how it's laid out. And yeah, I hope that the applicant and the developer and so on will share lessons learned afterwards when when the project's complete. Look forward to following it.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth.
Thanks. Okay, just a few quick comments about the planting. Too much detail. Number one, double check that all of your seed mixes from Pacific are native species. A lot of the wildflower mixes aren't. Number two, I think it would be nice to minimize the amount of sod lawn, like maybe outside of the yard areas, and maybe use like a bee turf or something else that's a low maintenance, low mow mix that's not going to go brown in the summertime. The Stuca glauca pretty much dies immediately after the first winter, so I wouldn't use it as a foundation. Maybe a different, it doesn't like the wet roots. Saturation here, that goes along with lavender too, generally. And then I know it's, oh, and one more thing, Toniaster, I'd sub that for Kinnicknick. I know you probably can't add more trees, but it would be nice to see more trees, and especially native species. And it would be nice if you could like maybe bring up some of the native species into the planting around the buildings. Maybe just be a bit more creative with the rows of hydrangea and rhodos and kind of mix it up a bit, make it a bit more naturalized and softer. And Choicea also has a hard time. Winters have been hard on it. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, sweet gum's been brittle lately too. Okay, that's it.
Great, thank you. I believe we still have to hear from Brent.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a lot of similar comments to the rest of the people on the panel. Congratulate the applicant. I think going for step 5 when it's not needed is definitely a noteworthy thing and something that is appreciated. I think that some of the comments around accessibility and ensuring accessibility is planned and has been considered and designed into at least some of the units is definitely would be a good addition. And I think that access, people who are likely to buy step 5 possible net zero home are likely interested in walking and biking. And I think that the circuitous access to get down to Finch Drive would be could be a deterrent and lead to sort of people driving when they don't need to. So if there's any way to provide pedestrian access, non-accessible access down the slope, I think that would be a great thing to look into. Yeah, like the form and character, I think that the tones of green really, at least in the renderings, look really nice, and excited to see what the buildings look like. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Have I missed anyone? I'm going to close off then.
Can I? Sorry, Charles, I didn't.
Oh, Sema, is because you've ended up
I
out
was
of order down way down on my screen. Yes, please.
Yeah, my comment is quick. I just echo all the previous comments. Most importantly, on accessibility and adaptability of the habitable spaces and pedestrian pathways, and also I comment on accessibility of the all the site amenities and building amenities, like mailbox, this sort of thing. Also, I suggest to provide more adaptable and accessible commercial parking. A revision to revisit the fire truck accessibility. And I also comment on indigenous culture in design, and please consider the culture in design and some consideration like smuggling type of things, mostly for public spaces. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to close off. I'm going to try to keep my comments short here. First of all, thank you for the package. I think the design as it stands, there's some some very nice poetic aspects. I like the story behind the colors and the selections of materials. I like the general kind of articulation of the form. It has a nice kind of rhythm and scale. I like the livability of these units, accessibility issues notwithstanding. I feel, however, that the package could have used a little bit more design development, especially on the detail level, and considering things like additional detailing and trim around the windows, patterning and texture of some of the elevational materials, and especially there's this wall at the north end of the building, which is largely blank and is clad in hardy panel, even though it's clearly intended from an architectural language point of view to look as if the roof form is kind of folding over, and you sort of expect or want that to be a standing seam cladding rather than a hardy panel. I think it's manageable as a hardy panel as a cladding, but I'd like to see a little bit again of development of kind of texture and pattern, a kind of playfulness. If we're evoking the sort of if the gray of the form is meant to kind of evoke the cliffside, then I'd like to see a little bit of kind of like a randomness to the pattern there that evocative of the cracking and cragging of the cliffside, for instance. There's I think the same kind of issue of attention to detail applies to the exterior spaces that we've already mentioned and talked a lot about the entrances. I think a lot of the exterior patio spaces as well. There's not a lot of design development there. So there's issues with the the privacy between the units and not a lot of a sense of how these spaces are going to get used as exterior living spaces. And therefore as well, I know, I understand it's a difficult issue to deal with because of the protected forest area to have that berm on the west, but I feel that somehow those little exterior spaces below the decks, possibly maybe having an exterior access from the second level down rather than through the garage would make those less of a mean space. But they seem under considered or under cared for. Jonas, where do we proceed from here?
So there should be 3 motions for the ADP. Oh, there's 4. Okay, perfect. I think Carly Simmons has emailed the 4 motions to you, Charles.
Yes, but I'm going to have to try to find those. I do have them.
I'm happy to share my screen right now because I have the report open, which has the recommendations. If I could get the ability to do that, please.
Thanks, Brian. And then so normally the panel would.
Thanks.
Now, normally we'd have an in-camera discussion, I believe, on at this point, wouldn't we?
No, not in Squamish. Okay. So normally the panel has 4 choices. Essentially, that the project is the ADP supports the project as is, meaning there's no changes that the ADP would like to see. And that's A. Number B is that the ADP supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the issues. And then there will be a list of issues to resolve. Generally, that is when there's no significant issues to address. C is that the ADP supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to resolve the issues and then come back to ADP. So normally that is reserved for cases where there are significant changes necessary and the ADP doesn't feel comfortable just letting the applicant work with staff on resolving those. The ADP wants to see it again. And finally, D, the project is not supported for the following reasons. It's very rare that we end up in the D situation. So yeah, those are the 4 options.
Right, thank you. Can I have a member of the panel then resolve for one of these recommendations so that we may, as a panel, vote on it?
I would motion for B, that support the project as presented, would like the applicant to work with staff with recommendations. I think that there's kind of been a few around accessibility, it's like adaptability of units and access for pedestrians. I think probably some other comments as well, but I'd motion for that.
Okay. As written, this resolution would require us to identify specific recommendations. Is it sufficient to say that we want to see the issues raised in our comments and minuted, be the issues that need to be resolved?
Yeah, what we've typically done, Charles, is kind of had, most recently, the chair would summarize what those key issues are. But it is kind of the staff responsibility to, take the comments that were raised by the panel, and if there are certain things that are more noteworthy, that's a benefit for staff.
Great, thank you. I'm going to try to summarize what I believe the major points were. I'm inviting, when I'm done, I'll invite the panel to add to that if they feel there's anything that's not been addressed. I believe the major issues were accessibility and pedestrian access east-west across the site. Further design development of the entrances off of the vehicular courtyard. Privacy issues for the units facing east toward the apartment building. Design development of the exterior patio spaces to the west of the buildings, which are bermed in, as well as access from living space to those exterior at-grade spaces. I'm going to add, from my own comment list is further design development on detailing of the cladding, which I believe Jamie as well alluded to in terms of the challenges of properly detailing a hardy panel so that it, enhances the project rather than hurts it. Could I have someone maybe who's more familiar with the landscape aspect add comments?
I just wanted to add to explore the possibility of those units being able to be visited via the back patio.
Yes. I think that goes hand in glove with the aspect of the pedestrian access as well. So who are the landscape representatives on the panel? Because I believe, Elizabeth, you're simply member at large, right?
Yeah. I don't know if the landscape architect is here today.
Right. Can I have you speak to specific areas of concern on the landscaping design?
Sure, I think they were minimal, mostly just kind of reducing the amount of sod, maximizing native species, maximizing trees where possible. Again, yeah, kind of that, like the treatment of the berm and the treatment of the wall on the west and the east side, and softening those spaces a little bit to make those spaces more livable.
Great, thank you. I believe if we have those the minutes of that summary have been taken, that we are earmarking those as being part of the resolution. Is it acceptable for us to vote on the proposition?
Well, don't we just need somebody to second the motion?
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great, thank you. I believe we can vote. Is by show of hands acceptable? Great. That's a yay. Now I am a split screen. I can't see everyone at once, but it looks like we have unanimity. Kat, were you raising your hand or drinking? Great, thank you. I believe that brings this item to a close. I'd like to thank the proponents for their proposal and their time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all of your comments, panel.
Hi, Charles. This is Carly, the minute taker. Just as a suggestion with the voting, if you want to ask any not in favor to raise their hand, it might be helpful.
Yes, certainly. Do we in fact have anyone? Was I incorrect in the unanimity of the panel?
You weren't incorrect, just that it might be easier for you to see if there's anyone not in favor versus everyone that is in favor.
So can I have show of hands for those not in favor of B with the summarized items? All right, thank you. So it does not appear that we have anyone objecting to the resolution.
Perfect. I've noted, motion carried. At this time, you can call for a 5-minute break if you like.
I believe that would be warranted. We've been at this for very nearly 2 hours. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hey, Carly.
Hi.
Did we approve the minutes? Do we need to?
All right. Carly?
Hello.
Hi. As Kat pointed out, I accidentally skipped over an important aspect of the agenda earlier, which involved the adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting.
Yeah, if you could get a motion to do that, we can get that covered off right now.
Yes, well, I will simply motion that and invite someone to second, and we can vote on it.
I'll second it.
Incidentally, myself and several other members of the panel are new and therefore were not attendants at that meeting and can't speak to the content. So I'm assuming that we won't be needing to vote on that or be considered part of the quorum. So do I have a second on the adoption of the minutes from September 15th? Brent, thank you. And would those who are qualified to do so please vote? Do we have a yay on the adoption? Kat, Brent. Great.
That looks good.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Do we have any nays? No, great. Thank you. I believe we are now ready to move to the next item on our agenda, which is the project DP 594, 1701 Centennial Way Phase 2. Now, I have to recuse myself here. I'm part of the team who are working on this project from Acoustics. Jonas, would I still chair or would I hand this over to the vice chair to lead this portion of the meeting?
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, if you could hand it over to Brent for this portion of the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Yeah, I'd like to introduce development permit 594-1701 Centennial Way Phase 2. I'll pass it over to district.
I'll take that. Thanks. Thank you. So my name's Jessie Abraham. I'm a planning consultant representing the District of Squamish Planning Department. I am here to introduce the development permit application for a mixed-use development located at 1701 Centennial Way. This is phase 2 of 3 phases. So phase 2 proposes 7 buildings with a mix of commercial, retail, office, and residential, condos and townhouses. The project is within Development Permit Area 3, so universal guidelines do apply. The project has undergone a comprehensive development rezoning process, so CD90 was adopted in July 2021, which has set the general parameters for the development, including siting, size, density, and massing. This is the first time the application is being presented to ADP. Staff review finds that most guidelines are met and are seeking ADP recommendations on the overall building form and character as it pertains to DP Area 3 universal guidelines. So this includes materials and colors. So some of the buildings are in a key location near Centennial Way and Loggers Lane intersection and present an opportunity for a vibrant commercial environment. Staff are seeking review and recommendations on the proposed materials, including quality and sustainability, on the color palette, specifically for buildings 1 and 2, articulation, specifically the roof articulation on building 1, and variation across all 7 buildings. We are also looking for feedback on accessibility including pedestrian routes and surfacing, public pavilion, and open space areas. And with that, I will hand it over to the applicant to present their proposal.
Great. I'll jump in right now. Brent Carlson at Anthem Properties. Thank you, Jesse. I'll speak quickly because you don't want to hear from me. You want to hear from Mark.
Actually, Brent, if I may interrupt, because we're so short on time, we'd like to move straight to the architect's presentation if possible.
Okay, sure. Can I say one thing then, Jonas? It's an awesome project. You guys should be happy with it. Go for it. We've met with some of you before on phase 1, took a lot of the lessons learned there, the comments and concerns, and applied what we learned and were approved on with phase 1 into phase 2 here. So we should be really quick, Jonas. So we're working for your side today. There you go. Thanks. Over to Mark.
Great, thanks, Brent. I think I'll just need, there we go. I have share permission now. And I'll bring up the screen. Okay, presentation. Okay, can everyone hear me okay? And has the screen up? I'll take that as a yes. Okay, thanks everyone. My name's Mark Blackwood, principal architect with Acoustics Architecture. As was noted, we've been working on this project through the rezoning process and through its multiple phases. There we go. Lag there. So just some overall context, because this is a multi-phase project. The project we're looking at today is part of phase 2 of the development, highlighted in red. Phase 1 across the street from Centennial Way is currently in the building permit phase and is, again, kind of a mixed-use project of light industrial, office, daycare, rental, residential apartment building. And phase 3 south of it, which is still to come, is an all townhouse site. Phase 2, highlighted in red, is bound by Centennial Way along the southern edge, Loggers Lane along the western side of the site, as well as sort of an existing stand of trees. And then along the northern edge of the site, we have an existing dike trail along the Mamquam. And then we're close proximity to the Brennan Park Recreation Center, tennis courts, and sort of a works yard kind of to the south of us on the other side of Centennial Way. So just some overall context there. Just to kind of reiterate, the idea of this community is to really create an integrated mix of uses with the opportunities to truly kind of have a community where you can live, work, and play, and have a lot of the amenities kind of on site, and kind of enjoy where you live and not have to travel very far for some of the basic amenities. And this is achieved really through all three phases combined, which is kind of all under the umbrella of this CD90 zoning. Kind of zooming in a little bit more on the topic of today, which is kind of phase two. As mentioned, looking at the overall site plan here, generally access is off of Centennial Way. Because of the positioning of this particular site, it really is kind of the gateway to this development and kind of this leg of Centennial Way. So with that in mind, when looking at the overall site planning, there was attention put to, okay, what is that entry kind of corner experience? So one of the first things you see is this, what we're calling kind of the pavilion building, which is really an opportunity to kind of announce the corner of the site. It's a generous height, single-story building, so it's also being used as kind of a scaling element to the backdrop of the 6-story building in behind, which is the mixed-use retail at grade, some second-story office and residential, and then the remaining stories above are residential apartments. The other 5 buildings we see along Centennial Way are 4-story townhouse buildings, and then along the Dyke Trail, a series of 3-story townhouse buildings that kind of address the internal courtyard, but also the Dyke Trail and the Mamquam River. Now, the interesting thing about this site is it is kind of nestled up against the dike, so we're able to essentially slide parking kind of into that slope to some extent. We do have a 2-story parkade, but we are using the buildings to on the southern edge, we're using the buildings really to kind of screen and wrap over the edge of the parkade, so it's not evident from the street. And on the northern side, we're into the slope, so it's kind of a truly buried condition. Next slide. Sorry, there's just a bit of a lag on the changing of the slides here. There we go. So just overall site and program, we have 79 market condo units on this site. Under the CD zoning, there's a commitment to 8 of those being adaptable. As I mentioned, 2 commercial levels of about 1,800 square feet of combined office and retail. The pavilion building, which is 2,150 square feet. The 5 townhome buildings, a combination of 3 and 4 stories, totaling 32 townhome units. The other thing to note in the program is in the upper right-hand corner, under the CD zoning and the land use agreement, there's a commitment to construct a riverside pavilion, so that's part of the development. We also have this fire access lane, which is used to service emergency access to some of the townhouse buildings that are sort of deeper into the site, as well as considerable outdoor play and amenity space that Stephen from DKL will speak to in the landscape section. So just looking at that distribution of program, two schematic sections here quickly. The first is section A, which does kind of a east-west cut through the mixed-use building. The lower level is parkade. At grade, we have the commercial with some office making its way up to the second level, and then the remaining portion of the building is the market condo. Looking the other way from the pavilion along Centennial Way, making its way back to the Mamquam Channel, we have that single-story pavilion building, the 2 stories of retail/office, and the residential above. A central mews between the buildings, which is generously sized. It varies in width from 50 to 60 feet. And then our 3-story townhomes, which front onto the mews and to the north onto the outdoor amenity space, Dyke Trail, and the Mamquam River. Just to touch on circulation, the main circulation off of Centennial Way is through kind of a looping system. We have 16 at-grade parking stalls and 3 loading stalls in front of the commercial retail and pavilion. In red there, you can see the main access to the 2-story parkade. And then further to the right, there's vehicle access, which provides not only access to the fire lane, but also 6 stalls directly adjacent to the Dyke Trail and the pavilion that would be right on the river's edge there. So that's sort of the major vehicle circulation routes. From a pedestrian point of view, we've taken a lot of care and effort to consider accessibility around the site. All of the kind of orange arrows are sort of the accessible routing through the development. And really there's just a few locations, generally getting up onto the higher podium of the central mews is where we have some non-accessible stairs. So at the at the western edge of the site and kind of this eastern corner here, there's stairs taking up to the podium, but further along there's accessible routes into that central space as well. And then kind of the red arrows are really just highlighting the many opportunities to provide accessible access to sort of the retail level along the south, and then also to the residential suites themselves. I'll just highlight as part of this development as well as a new pedestrian crossing accessing the adjacent site on the southern side of Centennial Way, as well as there'll be upgrades to the intersection at Centennial Way and Loggers Lane. From an architectural perspective, we're taking cues from our development on site 1, phase 1 of this development. And it's really this combination of contrasting more kind of industrial materials like the corrugated metals, and really kind of contrasting that with wood tone materials and kind of dark grays and glazing, providing opportunities for ample natural light and ventilation. And I think it's this combination that really speaks well to not only the context of Squamish, but also sort of the edginess of the site and even some of the industrial references nearby. So this is sort of our kind of jumping off point for not only the phase 1 of the development, but also phase 2, and really a desire to make sure that this community feels contiguous and complementary, although they are 3 distinct phases. So generally speaking, the main palette for the project is a combination of a darker corrugated metal siding and a warmer kind of earthy red, which is actually called an oak brown corrugated metal siding, and then really a 2-tone approach of kind of a more light gray beige hardy siding and sort of a darker gray hardy siding as well in contrast. And then in protected areas as well, primarily soffits, introducing wood tone materials to really kind of provide warmth in those areas where we're providing cover and enclosure. Just some overall rendering sort of demonstrating the strategy from an elevational and massing perspective. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the kind of the single-story pavilion building, which provides a kind of a feature at the corner. And then the building, the 6-story mixed-use building itself, has kind of a tripartite arrangement of kind of a strong base with the retail and the 2nd-story office kind of being in this sort of darker gray corrugated metal. And then using kind of bump out kind of exoskeleton kind of forms, I could say, around some of the balconies, creating protruding massings, using the the feature red, this oak brown corrugated metal siding. And then the main field of the building is this combination of these kind of light and dark gray fiber cement horizontal sidings. Sorry, I'm just trying to switch slides here. It's giving me a bit of a delay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so just another view. I think just further kind of giving some insight into some of the main massings of the building. One thing I'll note, part of the CD zoning is a commitment for public art at this corner as well. So, Anthem as the developer has a commitment there to sort of develop an art piece at that corner, which I think will create a nice showpiece at the entrance to the development. And then just another view from the other end. Here you start getting a bit of a glimpse of our approach to kind of weather protection along the retail edge, providing kind of a continuous overhang, exposed timber beams and kind of wood tone soffits, again, kind of creating that sort of natural complement to the more industrial kind of corrugated metal siding. Just a view from the Muse. So obviously on this side, it scales down to a 5-story building because it's wrapping on top of the parkade. Just a view of the pavilion building. So I think a really great opportunity to create a bit of a social node right on the corner. Great coffee shop or bakery, would be ideal in a space like this. Just some elevational views, again, using the corrugated metal, wood timber accents, and kind of that gray fiber cement panel. The townhomes, sort of a continuation along Centennial Way. The townhomes are 4 stories on the Centennial Way side, and then as they wrap up onto the parkade, 3 stories on the Muse side. And we wanted to create kind of a strong cadence of sort of bump outs to really highlight the individual units and their front doors. So always kind of putting a lot of attention onto the sense of front entry and colors of doors and great canopy and stoop conditions at the front of every entry is always kind of part of our design language, and while still kind of expressing a nice contemporary aesthetic to the overall building. So again, on the townhomes, we kind of shake up the color palette a little bit on these, where we introduce more of a blue corrugated metal in contrast to kind of a lighter and darker corrugated metal pattern. And then in the background field, introducing fiber cement panels. And then here you can see sort of that wood toned soffit material up at the upper deck. And just some further views of various angles of the townhomes.
Hi, Mark. Just letting you know we've reached 15 minutes. I don't know if there's a landscape presentation that needs to happen as well.
There is, yeah. I'm just about done here. I'll be able to hand it over to Stephen. So it's just a few more views of the townhomes themselves from the central muse. Okay. From a sustainability point of view, the project's, aiming to achieve step 4. In addition, kind of looking, the project team's looking at efficient envelope and air tightness performance targets. As always, kind of looking for high performance kind of glazing, a robust rainwater management plan and stormwater retention. And then kind of the use of kind of air conditioning and using high efficiency, excuse me, high efficiency heat recovery ventilator systems. For the townhouse portion, from a low carbon point of view, we're proposing sort of all electric systems and level 2 charging for electric vehicles for 30% of the condos and 1 stall per townhome. In the specifications of the project, also kind of putting emphasis on low VOC materials. The roofing materials would have a higher reflectivity or kind of a high albedo rating to kind of keep the buildings cool, and targeting low flow plumbing fixtures and kind of efficient lighting through the use of LED fixtures. So with that, apologies, it seems to get hung up on changing a slide here once in a while.
While it's changing, I'm Stephen. Just kind of step in here now. Thanks, Mark, for that. So I'm a registered landscape architect with Durrani Crook. Pleasure to be here this afternoon to present the landscape to you. I know time is very tight, so I'll work through it quite quickly. I'm used to this. Seems like the landscape portion always gets squished down in time a little bit. But anyway, Mark did a great job of doing a lot of overlap with the landscape in terms of what you're looking at right now, which is public amenities, so the public art location. Talked a little bit about the public pavilion right next to the Dyke Trail, which is fantastic, fully accessible, so you can park your car and enjoy it, or just obviously walking along the Dyke Trail. And then the children's playground is besides being a fantastic public amenity, is also a nice transition from the Dyke Trail, kind of a natural environment and the water's edge, to the project, with providing a really nice strong buffer. So one of the goals was to use a lot of natural materials, and so the next page is don't quite shift there yet, Mark, but the next page really shows kind of the idea of which is trying to integrate a lot of natural materials and providing a substantial amount of buffer with planting. So, for example, we're using Robinia play equipment, which is, for those of you familiar with it, is more of a natural type of play equipment, using logs and boulders for edges of plant, for play areas, for safety surfacing, and all that. So, I think most people are familiar with that, so I won't go into that in too much detail. This is the public amenity pavilion, which Mark talked about before. Nice open concept, great for social gatherings for people in the building or just from people passing by. Could kind of keep moving on there, Mark. So we wanted to just, this is some pictures that maybe some of you have seen before, and really this encompasses our feeling for the whole project in itself. So we, right at the outset of the project, we really wanted to establish a feeling for the landscape. And so I think we've been very successful in kind of across the board. We've done it in kind of different ways for each different phase, but still accomplishing what we set out to do. In terms of flexible open space, we haven't provided some of that, although we're kind of restrained on how much grass and lawn area we use, just because it's not really sustainable. It takes a lot of water and also maintenance. So we do provide some areas for kids to play on, for people to kind of kick the ball around a little bit. But by and large, we're really trying to be mostly providing more planting, more lush types of landscapes. In terms of tree and shrub planting, trying to look at primarily native species, although we do have some adaptive plants, bringing in some broadleaf evergreens for that, that winter balance. So not all the plants are leafless, but we have some perennials for some color. Not all of the plants are indigenous, as I said, but there are a lot of them are adaptable and we feel are appropriate for this type of landscape application. Mark showed a plan of the pathways, lots of pathways throughout the site. At every point of this design, we were very mindful of accessibility. So if we feel we've really done a good job with that, we've provided a lot of, and Mark, you can probably point to a lot of the amenity spaces. So throughout the whole site, we have lounge areas for hanging out with tables and chairs. We have an internal play area. On the east side of the site, you can see that little rectangular platform, which is sort of like the step platform where people can kind of hang out. Tables and chairs, picnic spaces. Some are covered for shelter, shade. So a real variety of spaces that we're providing here. We also spent on the west portion of the site. There's a route that goes straight from Centennial way all the way up to the dike, which is 5%, which was really important. So no handrails. Really, we wanted to make that feel like a forest pathway. So on the west side, of course, you've got the forest, reserve forest, which remains, of course. And then as you move up that pathway, we're really trying to create a feeling of trees and planting so that you really feel like you're walking through a forested area as much as we could anyways. So I guess one thing I just wanted to say along the dike trail, we also have a split rail fence. You might have seen that in the initial perspective that was shown at the beginning of the presentation. So you see that quite a bit around Squamish in that sort of condition where it's kind of a soft edge between, a natural area and maybe development such as this. In terms of materials, really mindful of, heat islands. So trying to keep things a little bit lighter. Obviously we have some asphalt where there's vehicle access, but the road for the fire truck, for example, is crushed gravel, so somewhat permeable and also doesn't absorb that much heat, so you don't get this massive sea of asphalt in that space. That was a really an important amenity area. So moving on to the sections, these sections are really focused on that pathway along the west side of the property. So we just wanted to kind of do a little study of how that works. So you can see section AA, starting out with plants on both sides of you. BB kind of through a plaza, we still have planting. So at every point of the way, there's some sort of planting around you. So again, just reinforcing that idea of that pathway through the forest. The last one, section FF, is at the top where it's basically taken through the play area and then transition into the project to the public, the private space there. Yeah. The next section or the next page just shows some internal sections and how the relationships work with the slab and the patios and such. I won't get into too much detail. I know you have the information in your packages, so I know I went through this quite quickly. I apologize for that, but I know time is important and we still have a fair bit of comments and questions to get through. So hopefully if you do have any questions, there is a lighting plan as well. There's probably some lighting questions, so maybe I should just quickly. So the idea with the lighting was really obviously to provide low-level lighting. We really are mindful of keeping that dark sky initiative. It's lovely to see the stars in the nighttime. So the lights are very purposeful, but they're continuous around the whole site. So there is, walking at nighttime, lots of lights for safe movement. So with that, I'll wrap things up. And I'll just shout out to Kimberly as well. She's not on the panel, but she did a lot of the work on this, and she may be listening on, but she was the main force in pulling this all together and really created, I think, a really exciting landscape that we're excited about. We hope you'll agree, and we look forward to comments. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, and I think that's, I think we can go to comments there. That's also the end from an architectural perspective.
Great. I will pass it over to John first for questions.
Thanks, Brent. Just a couple of quick questions. So could you clarify the pavilion building? Is that like a strata amenity or is that a commercial space?
No, so that will be a commercial space, and
Okay.
it was something that was written into the original CD zoning, is that there needed to be a sort of a commercial presence on the corner of the site there.
No, perfect. Thank you. And then you mentioned that there are some upgrades to the intersection at Loggers Lane and Centennial. That's currently a four-way stop. Could you detail a little bit more what those offsite upgrades will be?
Yeah, so I think the actual detailing is still, I think, under review with engineering, but there's a commitment to either a new kind of, I believe it's a lit intersection or a roundabout. I'm not sure if you have any other information on that, Brent.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. We're still working through that, John, with Squamish and with the engineering department, but the intent behind it is they want to go with a roundabout. So we're just working with them to enhance and redo that so that it's safe functioning for traffic. Sorry, roundabout was what they had talked about. Now they're going back to the four-way stop. So I think it's going to remain the four-way stop, just enhanced a bit with new crosswalks, that sort of thing, and new paving and curbing, all the rest of it. So, but still to be worked through further with engineering.
And just maybe one last question. The last project that we looked at this afternoon, right before this one, was the townhouses were committing to hitting step 5 and being net zero ready. Wondering if you guys gave any thought to pushing the sustainability side of this project a little further than what you've offered here.
Yeah, well, we've committed to step 4, which is fairly significant, and especially I think you have to not that it maybe makes a difference, but we started on this project a number of years ago. It's just taken a very long time to get to where we are today. And so step 4 commitment, all the townhouses we've committed to, and this is in the zoning and in our land development agreement now. For the phase 3, which is the at-grade townhomes, it's all clean energy, all electric heat source and cooling. And same with the townhomes in this phase 2. So those 5 townhouse buildings are all electric powered. And so we feel that we've really stepped up quite a bit with those, as well as the low albedo rated roofs, or sorry, high albedo rating to give a lot of reflective light and to mitigate any as much heat sort of transference there as possible. So some fairly, I think, significant measures for what we're doing here and what we're trying to provide.
All right, I will pass it on to Elizabeth next.
Thanks. You mentioned that you are managing stormwater on site, and is that all the stormwater? And
it's really hard to hear you, Elizabeth.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned you're managing stormwater on site. Just wondering if you can point out where and if that you're managing all the stormwater on site.
Yeah, the stormwater will be using stormwater detention tanks in large part, and they will be placed typically in the front surface parking area under the surface there, and there will be collection tanks there, and then they'll feed out into the storm system after that.
Yeah, and I'll just add, there's also an effort being made to use sort of highly permeable landscape, paving and elements. So as much as we can kind of promote that natural percolation, the better.
Yeah, and one more comment. We have a swale along the front of the project as well, which obviously not all water will be able to make it there, but a fair bit of water coming off that road along the front there, and the front landscape will go towards the swale. Or kind of like a bioswale, you could say. I just didn't have enough time to kind of go into that level of detail.
Anything else, Elizabeth, or is that nope? I'll pass it on to Jamie.
I just have a question about thermal comfort strategy. I thought there's a mention of air conditioning. Is there mechanical cooling provided for the apartment building and for townhomes, or what's your strategy for this?
Well, just quickly, the hot water will be done for the condo building by a main system down in the Park 8. So there will not be individual, hot water heaters per unit. It'll be a centralized system. And we'll be doing, for cooling for the units themselves will be PTAC system, if you're familiar with that. So it's like a spot air conditioning type system. It affixes to the exterior wall, and it will be in the living room and in the primary bedroom.
And is there an outdoor condensing unit for each of those units, or is it just contained in a wall?
They're contained on their own, and there will be ERB system as well.
Okay. And do the townhomes have mechanical cooling, or just
They'll be on HRV for the townhomes.
for ventilation? Okay. In terms of bike parking, so are all I guess there's about 100 total units if you add up apartments and.
Yeah, there's 79 condominium units and 32 townhomes, and they all have bike parking.
So there's a big bike parking room on the sort of west side of the parkade plan. Is that all? That's kind of one bike parking zone for all units.
That's for the condo building. If you're looking at what I think you're looking at, it's at the P1 level, backside of the commercial space. That is all to serve the 79 condo units. And then each of the townhomes have their own independent as well, storage unit.
Which is located below the footprint of their unit, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. There's
and then,
2 locations.
Okay. And then from those various locations, those are all at P1 level, so there's a kind of a at grade connection to go, like you can kind of
yeah, that's right.
So trip, come in kind of at grade from outside from the street, and then you're up into your unit from there.
Yeah, so the western edge of the project, there's a doorway that kind of leads to kind of a rear access that gives you direct access to sort of the bike and storage, and also to complement that is some end of trip facilities as well for the commercial. So that's all directly accessible at grade, which is nice.
Okay. And then this is a question just picking up on. I think I heard you saying that there's some intersection design happening where Loggers Lane meets Centennial Way. Is that what the intersection you're talking about, where it's question mark about roundabout or?
Correct.
So is there? I know there's a crosswalk plan to the other part of the development. Is your consultant team responsible for design of that crosswalk, or are you just kind of it's something that you're funding as part of the development and the city is designing?
Which crosswalk are you referring to? The one stemming.
Is there one to connect to the other phases?
Yes. Yeah. No, we're funding and constructing.
And is there any other traffic calming measures? I'm just looking at all the other kind of uses further down Centennial Way. Like you've got nice commercial uses on both sides of this, connecting the various phases on both sides. But then you've got some pretty heavy traffic. Is there any other traffic calming that's being done?
Well, we're still working through the servicing items with engineering, so I can't comment further on that at this point. That's not all resolved yet.
Okay, that's everything from me.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Pass it on to Kat, please.
Sure. Thank you for the presentation. I want to start by saying I love the location of the public art, so I'm very happy to see that. Since everyone else gets to see the design of the buildings, but the public art wasn't really talked about, can you talk about your process of choosing artist and commissioning this piece?
Sure. We're engaging with a public art consultant, and then that group go and they put together a panel of artists, and we go through a process with the public art consultant, the artists, and we have to work through the district's public art policy on that. So it's ongoing to work through still with the district, and we have been, I think it was referenced earlier by, I can't remember whom, we have a commitment in the rezoning and again in the land development agreement, and there's a budget that's being dedicated toward the public art, which just, and it's overall for the entire project, all 3 phases. It just happens to be that the location for it is being earmarked for this location on phase 2, so that it has the most public benefit, I think, at that point, or most visible, most people.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right, I will pass it over to Luke next, please.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Mark and Stephen, for your presentation. It's a pretty comprehensive package you got there. I guess my first question would be, is there an accessible parking space next to the pavilion?
So there are 2 accessible stalls at the there's the 16 surface level parking stalls in front of the retail. You know, towards the eastern part of that are 2 accessible stalls, so not far from the pavilion. It's kind of more right in front of the residential entry and those other CRU units at grade, but there's 2 there.
Okay, and is there an accessible path of travel between those?
There is, yeah.
Spaces?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And can you walk me through your strategy for the design of the roof forms? So across most of the development, it's majority flat. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, so I think we wanted to sort of maintain a relatively, clean language for the building. Also trying to sort of keep the overall scale and height of the building down as well. It was really about sort of expressing more sort of the horizontal lines and kind of the horizontality of the massing itself, and then really allow kind of the lower elements on the lower stories of the buildings to kind of do the work in terms of kind of articulating the building face, but really keeping kind of a nice clean overhang and facial line, as not to kind of just busy it up too much. I think we needed that to kind of hold the buildings together.
Okay, and is it the same sort of strategy for the townhomes as well then?
That's right.
Would
Yeah.
it be the same? Okay. The file in and the children's playground at the back. I see that the children's playground is sort of in the northwestern side, and then the pavilions in the northeast. Was there any consideration given to like elongating that, like between where the fire lane is and where the children's playground is?
Yeah, I think it in part had to do with sort of the available space. Like, although the pavilion is part of this project, it's actually in a right of way for the dike. So we're kind of limited in terms of, the space that's more available to us for kind of things like the kids play and all of those outdoor spaces. Kind of pushed it all more towards the western part of the site. So that's sort of the challenge there. The pavilion was sort of an allowable kind of structure within the dike structure itself.
Okay, thanks. Is there any sort of development in what sort of program will be in the indoor amenity space, like use-wise?
Yeah, so we've got just over 1,000 square feet of indoor amenity space, and really, it's a good size space, but you also can't kind of over program that too much. So the idea is to really create a nice kind of social space for, strata gatherings, birthday parties, people who can, you know, a space for people to host events kind of outside of their units and still have some of the amenities of like a, sort of a kitchenette, lounge, kind of maybe a good, nice large harvest table to kind of gather people around for kind of larger meals, and but really kind of keep it a bit flexible as well.
Okay. And then, sorry, I was rushing to look through the plans, but the end of trip facility, where could you show me where that is again, and how you would arrive at that and then go to the commercial? I'm assuming there's one for commercial, and is there one for residential too?
Not for residential. Let's see here. If I can go back. Sorry, we're just gonna have to pull up a.
Okay. I'll look through too.
Yeah, there's an end of trip facility, which is geared more for the commercial area, and that's behind, behind the residential lobby. Yeah, there you are, right in there.
It highlighted everything I didn't want it to highlight, but it's right in this. It's right in that zone there.
That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, so it's kind of right off the. There's access directly off the parkade, from the parkade level itself.
Okay. And there is no residential end of trip facility in this project. Is one required?
I don't believe it's required because generally, people can use their own, their own bathrooms for that.
Okay.
It's really to service those people who are maybe riding into work and don't have that facility in their office.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's all my questions for now. But thank you.
You bet.
Great, thanks, Luke. I'll pass it to Sarah next, please.
Hi, can you just tell me about the surfacing that's being used on the fire access lanes and up to the dike?
Sure. Do you want to speak to that one, Stephen?
Yeah, it's
excuse me.
It's compacted gravel, so it's we feel like it's going to be, it's like a crushed, like a sort of a fine, like a 19 millimeter minus, so it compacts nicely. So we were discussing in terms of accessibility. I'm guessing that's where you're going with this. In terms of, and we, so it's not as good as asphalt, so there's a bit of a trade-off there. But we feel like it'll be a smooth surface that wheels can roll over it.
Okay.
I think to add to that, Stephen, sorry to cut you off, Sarah. There's also a sidewalk adjacent the fire lane, and that sidewalk is in paved material, not in the.
That's right. It's concrete.
Right, but I was just trying to determine that the pathways that are leading up to the dike seem to be the same material as the fire access lane. So
that's right.
Trying
Yeah,
to
so
understand.
that's right. So going down to the dike to the dike trail itself, though they're 5% max. They're less than 5% based on the grades that we're showing on the surveys. So, but they are crushed gravel material. Yes, that's true.
Okay. And then can you tell me what standards you're using for the accessible parking? Because it seems that you're missing access aisles between the parking spaces.
I believe they've all been widened. I'd have to double check the width of the dimension, but we're kind of using the wider standard for the stalls themselves. We may not just be showing the actual hatch for that kind of circulation zone.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sarah. I'll pass it to Lucas next.
Thanks, Brent, and thanks very much, Mark and Stephen. Really appreciate the presentation and comprehensive package. A couple of real quick questions from me. The materiality of the exposed parkade edge on the west of the site, what is that?
So we're looking at sort of architectural concrete where that kind of parkade is kind of exposed. And then as that transitions, I guess it either starts disappearing below grade or at more the southern edge, the the storefront and whatnot of the retail begins to take over. And then trying to sort of layer landscape as much as we can along that edge to kind of soften that transition is also key.
Got it, thanks. And the dimension between the, sorry, it may be on A0.005. I'm just having trouble seeing on my set. But the dimension between the western edge of building 1 and then the eastern edge of building 1 and then the western edge of building 4, the townhouse, like right above the entrance to the parkade. Do you know what that is offhand?
So between the mixed use building and the townhouse?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Just sort of I don't want to call it a pinch point, but just between those two building edges, kind of above the entrance to the parkade. And if it's not on the set, don't worry about it.
Yeah, so it's more or less the width of that kind of driveway access into the parkade. So that, yeah, what is that? That's around 30 feet.
Okay.
Roughly.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks. And then final two questions. The parking stalls at the north eastern corner next to the dike trail and the public pavilion, are those intended for public use, like for members of the public using the dike trail to park there?
Public.
They are. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Got it. Thanks. And then final question, maybe a little bit outside of the scope of the ADP, but the office space, was that a choice to provide, or is that a requirement through the rezoning process?
Yeah, so it was a requirement as part of the rezoning. We have to hit a certain ratio of employment space relative to the overall development.
Gotcha. Thanks very much. That's it for me.
You bet. Thanks.
Okay, and I'll go to Sam next.
Thank you so much for the comprehensive package as well as well-designed facility. My only question is about outdoor spaces, and due to the pandemic situation and increase in demand for outdoor spaces for residential units, and the fact that single residential properties are becoming less affordable, the question is, have you explored design options to provide private outdoor spaces for residential units?
Yeah, so each of the apartments have have an outdoor deck, and then certainly all of the townhomes have a combination of either a yard space, say for where they're kind of at grade, and some of them have roof deck spaces as well, kind of not upper roof deck, but kind of decks on the upper floor of the building. And I think the benefit of this project is we not only have that sort of internal muse, which, as Stephen was mentioned, has been programmed with kind of various outdoor spaces and serving different functions, but also we've kind of paid attention to allow a lot of permeability through and out to the dike as well, which is kind of a fantastic outdoor amenity, and then obviously connects to the the larger context of Squamish and its trail networks. So.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think it's just me. Yeah, thanks for the presentation and package. A question about in front of buildings 6 and 7. There appears to be a second sidewalk sort of connecting those townhouses, and this might be more a question for district staff, but wondering if one of those could be or should be sort of a bike path or something that could connect to the Discovery, whatever the trail is that's running along Loggers Lane. And just wondering what the intent was with double sidewalk.
Yeah, I think with that one, because now these are the 2 townhomes that are fronting onto Centennial Way. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have quite a setback from the Centennial Way property line to the townhomes themselves. So it did feel a bit a bit long in terms of having like individual townhouse entry paths extend all the way to the public sidewalk along Centennial Way. So the idea here is to really create this kind of this little tertiary path that suddenly becomes kind of semi-private as you're kind of gaining access to those townhomes, and really allows the Centennial Way sidewalk to be the kind of the through the through route if you're kind of just not going to those townhomes and kind of making your way further along Centennial Way. So it kind of creates this little secondary kind of semi-private layer of circulation off of Centennial.
Can I just maybe add one thing to that for you, Brent? On the south side of the street there of Centennial Way, there's a new multi-use path that we are putting in as well. So it's on the south side. but it will lead from the corner of Loggers up to the signalized crossing. So there'll be a safe crossing route that way as well. And that multi-use path, of course, is a bike path as well.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that. I think all my other questions were asked, so I'm going to go in the same order as we ask questions. So I'll pass it back to John for comment. John, are you there? Go to Elizabeth, and we'll loop back to John at the end.
Great. Thanks, you guys. I'm pretty impressed, Stephen, with the landscape and the number of trees, especially. It's really nice to see and native plants. It's like some really nice green spaces. Just want to comment again on,
Elizabeth, can you speak up, please?
Sorry. Just wanted to emphasize the importance of stormwater retention on a site like this, because it's so big. It'd be really cool to see some of those tanks maybe supplying summer irrigation if possible. And, maybe some of the green spaces off slab actually being able to percolate stormwater back into groundwater. And otherwise, I think it looks pretty cool. Thanks. Oh, I have to go, so I'll just leave it with you guys.
Okay, I'll pass it on to Jamie.
Elizabeth, were you voting A, which is it's great, and just go through the way it is? There we are.
I'll trust my fellow panel members.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, if there's any other further concerns, I'll let them hit up. Thanks.
Thanks for your time.
So yeah, thanks very much for a pretty comprehensive package. Not a lot of time to review a pretty significant project. So feeling like we're a little bit pinched on the amount of review that we can contribute on it. I think there's a good use of the site grade to sort of ground the parking. It's nice to see a project that, surface condition is not dominated by kind of private car circulation. I think it's a little bit of a shame that the orientation or the placement of the commercial building, sorry, of the 6-story commercial building, that it casts significant shade on your kind of your best kind of common outdoor space in between the commercial building and the townhomes, because you've got 6-story building to the south of 3-story townhomes. I think that space, there's a lot of potential for that space in between the two buildings, and I think it's a little bit, it's not obvious to me what other way it could be laid out, but I think that's a little bit of a shame that there's so much shadowing of that landscaped area between sort of east-west running Mews area. I think maybe that space as well might be a little bit over-programmed from a landscaping point of view. It's quite dense with sort of planter walls, and the pathways are a little bit, convoluted and kinked in and out. It's, a nice central space in the middle of the project with the indoor amenity facing to it. And I think maybe it's maybe a little bit over-programmed for future flexibility. But again, it's kind of limited time to look at it. I think as well, I didn't have a chance to ask if, the current massing is informed by an energy model that's already up and running, but I think there's some reasonably complex massing on a lot of the projects, maybe the townhomes more than the apartment buildings. So, hitting step 4 is not never a huge challenge, but I think maybe it's making that challenge a little bit harder, that there's a lot of articulation architecturally. That's about it. Yeah, I think you can see that there's a lot of comments from the earlier phases of the project that have kind of already been addressed in anticipation of this. Some improved planning, and yeah, it's nice. It's really nice to see townhomes with walkout conditions front and back, where it's not you know, things aren't totally dominated by a private garage jammed into the front elevation of a townhome. So I'm really happy to see that. I think there'll be some really nice pedestrian areas in between the spaces, and that is a pretty significant move that's commendable. That's it for me.
Great. I'll pass it over to John.
Thanks, Brent. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah, just a couple of thoughts, I guess. Did wonder if there was maybe a little bit more opportunity for the commercial space on the pavilion. And I don't know, I was thinking as well, just looking at the width of the sidewalk in front of building 1, in front of the mixed use building, and wondering if there's any opportunity to make that just a little bit wider maybe. Thinking about the north side of the lot and that interface between the dike and the pathway and then the townhomes. Not just wondering if it's worth considering maybe some additional planting or a little work for privacy and to really make that distinction between the public and private space more clear. In terms of connectivity, I did wonder if there was maybe opportunities to have one or at least one connection from the site to the west to the multi-use pathway along Loggers Lane. Like there's that forested area. Wondering if there's any opportunity for more walking or cycling connectivity out that way. And I think that's about it. But yeah, I also want to echo, I really like the townhouse design. That looks great. Appreciate the really getting the automobiles below grade quickly so that they're not dominating the site planning and the design.
Great. I'll pass it over to Kat, please.
Positive comments from me. I think it's great that you're going through a process with an art consultant to make sure that it, again, isn't ending up with the same 2 artists that are kind of being chosen for a lot around town right now. I don't really have much to add, but I was going to ask who your public art consultant is. I know we're past questions, but I'm just curious.
Ballard. I'm not sure if you heard of them. Jan Ballard.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Go to Luke next.
Yeah, I just want to say that the package is great. It's really good to see a comprehensive package come to ADP. And I also really like that you've taken the previous comments on board from phase 1 when you presented to us on phase 1. It's great to see you really work hard to try and increase the pedestrian connectivity, because I think that's something that projects can lack sometimes. And then, again, yeah, great use of the site. I think pushing the parking back against the dike really allows you to like activate the ground plane on those townhomes, and that's a great step. My one comment on that would be that perhaps you could take it like a little bit of a step further on the street-facing elements of the 6-story commercial building. In Squamish, we're always pushed up against the FCL here, and we always end up with these kind of podium-type buildings where you've got 2 stories and then 4 above disconnected, and it can kind of make for a somewhat of a ugly building sometimes, and you've got to be really careful with it. So I think there may be an opportunity there to actually tie the upper levels down to the ground plane, which might even mask the fact there's a parkade below there even more, and further tie the whole architecture together. I really agree with your architectural expression page and the concepts behind it, including like the materiality. But there does appear to be, to me, like a little bit of a disconnect between how that translated onto the buildings. Like the language of the apartments, they come across to me a little bit institutional, almost like fully commercial, not residential at all above there. So then it could benefit from a bit more of like a playful design attitude rather than like such a linear sort of concept being applied to them. Like the roof lines maybe could be articulated. I don't want to be prescriptive with it. I think they just need to have a bit more of a maybe be a bit less refined in some ways. And again, with the townhomes, there's 5 townhome buildings there, 3 lined across the whole dike, and all of their roof lines align. And when we step onto the 4-story buildings from the 3, they're also aligned because it's actually the grade that seems to be dropping down. So I think like, yeah, adding some more playful elements to that, it might work. Again, with the architectural expression page, there's a lot of wood and steel elements, sort of post-industrial coming through there, but it doesn't really translate into that final thing when we're looking at all the hardy products and the corrugated metal. I think the corrugated metal could work really well, especially because you used it on phase 1, but perhaps it needs to have a revisit of materiality just to align it with your original concept. But other than that, I think it's looking really good and good work. Thanks.
Go to Sarah next.
Sorry, I have to run around my office so I can look at my multi-screens. So I'd just like to say, yeah, thank you for paying attention to many of the comments from last time, because there's much less for me to comment on this time. I think that the accessibility around the site is generally pretty good. Having said that, I would just encourage you to really make sure that the installation of your crushed granite pathways is done correctly, that you're putting down landscape cloth, that you're really compacting them. Otherwise, it's loose gravel and it's not an easy push, and will disintegrate with weather. Also, make sure that you're using the CSA guidelines for parking. I don't know that if Squamish has updated their parking bylaw. It's now municipally managed standard, but those spaces don't seem wide enough. And in fact, I would encourage you, as somebody with a large van, to add some sidewalk adjacent to the accessible parking that's in front of the apartment building to the right, where there's some planting. That would just give an option for a lift to extend onto that surface to exit the vehicle. With the accessible EV charging down in the parking level 1, make sure that you're following some guidelines with that as well. Retractable cables tend to be easier than lifting the cables. There's a bunch of guidelines that I found from Virginia and Vermont that were pretty good. So just do a Google search, you'll find something. With your, did you say 8 adaptable units? If they are truly adaptable, you must put back in the walls in the bathroom so that you do not have to destroy the walls before placing them. That's essential. The other, cabinets can be moved, but it just makes it a much easier transition. I think all of the amenity pieces, like the picnic tables, etc., have all been identified with longer ends, so that's great. I didn't see where the mailboxes are, but just make sure that those are at an accessible height. Otherwise, yeah, I think it looks pretty good. Just make sure that your parking is going to be the right size so that it's usable. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Go to Lucas next.
Yeah, thanks very much. Overall, really positive comments from my end as well. I think that the site layout, overall site plan is really well considered, particularly given the kind of high mix of uses that adds a lot of complexity. And as a couple of the other panel members already touched on, your ability to navigate the grades and to bury the parking at the rear of the site, while also kind of providing double aspect townhomes in building 3 and building 4, I think works really well. As well, I like the porosity between kind of the child's play area and the existing dike trail. I mean, it's a bit, completely understand that it's a requirement, but it is a bit cuts off the the rear yards of town building 3, 4, and 5, kind of from the dike trail. But yeah, realize there's not much to be done there. And then the other just comment on the site layout is just to kind of provide all the surface commercial parking adjacent to the pavilion in the southwest corner, shielded from sort of the residential component of the development. I think works really well. Regarding the materiality, I should have asked, but I'm interested in what drove the design decision to go to a corrugated metal cladding, because I think it works really well in this context. Like, so often in the Lower Mainland, like you go to a brick, and those exoskeleton components or the bump out components that are proud of the fiber cement panel. And I think in this application, the kind of varied color and of corrugated metal cladding works really well. Yeah, I think the only maybe kind of constructive or critical comment is the west unit in building townhouse 4 feels a little bit pinched between the mixed use building and the parkade entry. But overall, really think it's very well considered, both from a site layout and a materiality perspective. Thanks.
Thanks, Lucas. We'll go to Sema.
We already have had a long meeting, so I make it short. Well done. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Emma. And that's just me at the end here. Yeah, kind of echo comments from the rest of the panel. I think that with the site plan, it's done really well as far as hiding cars and providing access both sides of all of the townhouse buildings. A couple of things that I think could be considered is, I like that the fire access lane is in asphalt, but I'm not sure if gravel is, in my opinion, the best treatment. Sort of seeing that as somewhere that is primarily going to be a space used by the people that live in those townhouses. And I have a young daughter, and gravel is not the best play surface. So I don't know if there's something that could be acceptable by the district that's like a planted paver or something that provides a little bit more of a green surface, looks a little bit nicer, and would be a little bit better for play. And then the other comment is a little bit more of a general comment, and take this with a grain of salt. I'm not an architect, but I think that the multi or mixed use building has the risk of being, it's very much what we see in all of these 6-story buildings today, with kind of an extrusion that's a different color. Recognizing the materiality is a little bit different, but I sort of caution the design team that maybe considering something to change that, whether it is different color palettes or use of different products. But just the extrusion being a different color as an offset, I kind of think in downtown Squamish and many of the 6-story buildings that have been completed in the last 5 years look quite similar. So that would be my one caution. But overall, I think a good project. So I'll leave it there. And with that, unless anyone has any final comments, recognizing that it's been a long meeting, we are on to the 4 options. And so similar to the first proponent, I'll quickly read through those. So the ADP recommendation options are: A, that the advisory design panel supports the project and does not need to see this project returned for further review. B, that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. C, that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to present the revised project to the advisory design panel. Or D, that the advisory design panel does not support the project for the following reasons. So leave it to motion. Yeah, Sarah?
I'd like to make motion B, please.
Okay, and do we have a second, or I guess discussion around what those, I feel like there was, not a lot of comments, sort of some on materiality. I think that Jamie had some comments on, yeah. So I probably won't remember all of them. I feel like there wasn't a lot of consistent comments, but maybe working with the minutes from the district that anyone have anything in particular that they'd like to be highlighted?
No, thanks.
With not, well, yeah, so then do we have a second? Yeah, Zema, and then we'll go to all opposed. All right, perfect. So yeah, motion for B. And then
Can I
with
make
that,
a motion to end the meeting?
yeah, I was gonna check and see what's in the, I don't think there's anything else. Termination.
Just a motion to close.
Yeah, so Sarah, do we have a second? Okay, we'll go to Kat.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks. So I actually had a question for staff. Is there any interest in this turning into a in-person meeting again?
Hey, Brent. Jonas had to step out, so it's probably best discussed with him.
I'll send him an
and our
email.
legislative services team. I do know that your comment was received. I just don't know if Jonas has had a chance to discuss it. But maybe amongst yourselves, I don't know if there's anyone else that is interested in going back to that. I don't know what the.
I would be interested in that.
I would support that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, I'll pass it on to Jonas and staff, and then we'll get back to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for your time, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks all. Take care.
Take care. Bye.